And Gator Bytes is live.
And welcome into Gator Bytes on the 1010XL.com podcast network, also being simulcast on the Florida Gator 1010XL Facebook page. Today's Gator podcast is brought to you by Southeast Orthopedic Specialists. They're Northeast Florida's leading orthopedic center, providing an unparalleled level of care across numerous locations in both Jacksonville and St. Augustine. That includes Riverside, Northside, the South Side, the beaches, Fleming Island, and St. John's. He is Graham Marsh. I'm the hacker Ryan Green. First and foremost, a very happy Thanksgiving as we get ready to celebrate that tomorrow. And it's been a very happy couple of weeks for the Florida Gators. Back-to-back huge wins over LSU and Ole Miss. Absolute fire right now on the recruiting trail, and a big game at Doak Campbell Stadium Saturday night against the Florida State Seminoles. Graham, you were at the Swamp on Saturday. Boy, what a scene it looked like from my vantage point, from somebody that was there. Take us to Ben Hill Griffin Stadium. Must have been some scene leaving that place.
Yeah, Hack, it's fitting that we're doing this episode the day before Thanksgiving because before you even teed me up for that, I wanted to say that this year I'm thankful for Gator fans because between this podcast, of course, the award-winning Gator Bites and Denmark and Marsh, I think I can speak for Hack on this as well. Can't say enough about how thankful we are for everybody that tunes in, interacts with these Gator podcasts, and stuck through us all year, complained with us when it was bad, and celebrates with us now when it's good. Um, we just really, really appreciate it, and we like everybody that engages. You and I both have a lot of fun doing this, and we'll continue to do so as we move forward, and hopefully have more and more stuff to celebrate as this goes on. But to carry that onto the field, Hack, and just talk about Gator fans from a more macro perspective, man. Dylan Denmark and I went to the game together, Hack, and on our way out of the stadium, we looked at each other. One of the first things we said was, and you know this, Dylan and I have been to a bunch of games together, so it's a big sample size. We went to college together for a long time, went to every game back then. We've gone to a ton of games since. We looked at each other and said that was the best noon game we've ever gone to by far. Not even close. Obviously your 3:30s and your night games just have a level of juice that is really hard to replicate at noon. But Hack, the best way I can describe it is in the first half, crowd was great. There weren't empty seats, and the Swamp was doing what it does, right? But you know this, a noon game, you can only make it so electric, right? A noon game's a noon game, right?
People can't get the liquid courage in the parking lot prior to
Yeah,
the
and
game.
it's early, and when the sun's like out in full force, it's not the same as when the sun's setting or when it's nighttime. It's just different, right? We all
Sure.
know this. Everybody that's a football fan knows this. But that second half felt like a 3:30 game
Mm-hmm.
or a night game. Like it didn't feel like it was only 2 o'clock, 2:30 in the afternoon at that point. About midway through the third quarter, end of the third quarter, when we were singing "Walk Back Down" and singing "We Are the Boys" in between the third and the fourth quarter, it felt like one of those night games where everybody pulls their phones out and has the light. It felt like that. And when Ole Miss had the ball on third and fourth down, it felt like that. So again, we've talked about this multiple times this year, Hack, and it's been kind of a topic of conversation. Is the fan base toxic? Wasn't very toxic on Saturday. It was electric.
Go back to the LSU game as well, kind of the same thing. I've been kicking myself all week, and I have nobody to blame but myself. Um, this is the biggest comeback from a perception of a coach standpoint that I can ever remember in my 41 years on planet Earth. And the reason I'm kicking myself, and I think you can attest to this, Denmark, Matt Hayes, a lot of my colleagues there, is I was very, very pro Billy Napier, right? I was like one of the last guys on the Titanic. But even after that A&M game, I had no choice but to jump off. And I'm kicking myself because if I would have stayed with my convictions, I'd be looking like a genius right now. But I didn't. I was done with Billy like everybody else was done with Billy. And in the last 8 weeks, coaches don't recover from this. I mean, we were refreshing Twitter every 5 minutes the Sunday after A&M, which was
We were waiting for the breaking news tweet with Billy
right.
Napier's face on it.
That he's
Yeah.
gone, and we're
Yeah.
Lane Kiffin this and Eli Drinkowitz that, and if you can't get those guys, what about Rhett Lashley? I mean, we were talking about his successor, and now here we are. He beats LSU, destroying their playoff hopes. He beats Ole Miss, destroying their playoff hopes, and beats Lane Kiffin in the process. Is on absolute fire on the recruiting trail. And I did this on Hacker After Dark. I'll do it here. I apologize to Billy Napier because it is an amazing, amazing recovery. And he deserves an incredible amount of accolades for what he's done over these last 2 months with that team.
I'm sure you saw this, Hack. What he said with Chris Doering on the SEC Network the other day, it might have been yesterday, the day before, I thought was so like interesting that a coach was willing to say that. And I thought it was so profound. And you probably know what I'm talking about if you saw the clip where Chris Doering asked him about Chris Doering had said, look, in this job, Doring's least favorite thing to do that he's had to do has be critical of his alma mater at Florida. And Doring knew the type of heat Billy was facing early in the year. And Doring basically just asked him, what do you make of all that? What do you make of all the heat, all the criticism you took, all the fire Billy chants, all the rumors about the boosters had garnered the money. I don't even know if that's a rumor. That might be true. Had put the money together to pay the buyout and all that, and now you're here. And Billy Napier said, he's like, I think it'd be wrong to say we didn't deserve that criticism. Billy said that himself, which I thought was incredibly profound because, I talked about this with Dylan the other night. Something that I can really appreciate of what he's done is every coach, Hack, talks about how important it is to handle adversity. But in this business as well as I do, a lot of coaches are hypocrites when it comes to that, right? A lot of coaches mean players, you handle adversity. My staff, you handle adversity. But when things get tough for me, I'll lash out at the media and I'll act like it's not my fault and all kinds of stuff. Billy Napier has done nothing but truly take ownership of where they were at. He truly looked himself in the mirror and how they conducted practice and how they managed things and how their sideline presence and how they manage games. And he's gone back to Billy Napier has multiple times, and I know you've heard this talk about on broadcast and what have you. He's gone back to that practice they had after the first bye week many, many times. Talking about they kept score and they just went live and they went full pads and they hit and they like really competed that day. And he said it said so much about their team and how competitive they were, how much they all clearly still wanted it, regardless of what had come their way before that. And they took off from there. And it's been full steam ahead from there because they've obviously lost games since then, but other than the Texas game without Lagway, that was kind of a different circumstance. Other than that, even the games they've lost, they've looked like a different football team.
Well, and this kind of goes back to what I said, to your point with what he said to Doring. I think people liked Billy. I don't think they liked Jim McElwain. I don't think they particularly cared for Dan Mullen towards the end. This, to me, and I know we talked about this, was always way more Will Muschamp than it was McElwain or Mullen. And what I mean by that is Gator fans liked Muschamp. Gator fans can envision themselves having a beer and playing around a golf or having some dinner and talking ball with Will Muschamp. And they wanted it to work out for Muschamp, and it just simply did not. And at some point after 4 years, he had to cut ties. Same thing with Billy. I think Gator, it's hard not to like Billy Napier. All right, when you listen to him talk, when you talk to people that are around him, like I have to talk to a lot of these recruits, and some of the things they say about Coach Napier, it's hard not to think he's a genuine dude. He's a good dude. He's a guy that, yeah, I could talk ball with, have a beer with, have a hot dog with, play around a golf with, whatever. And now you have that feeling that you like the guy, but now the results are showing on the field, which is all the good feelings, vibrations, the warmth now in the Gator Nation among what's going on. And I go back, and shame on ABC, by the way. This pissed me off. I don't know if you saw this. They
Probably not since we were at the
Well, yeah,
game.
but it's been shown a lot on social media the last couple of days. His post-game interview wasn't aired live. They cut away to the studio with some stupid countdown clock of Texas and Kentucky instead of showing that live. But the
Okay.
the video went live, went viral after the fact. Seeing the genuine emotion that Napier had after that win on the field and talking to the ABC crew, again, how you don't like this guy, I don't know. You might have disagreed with his clock management. You might have
I
disagreed
still
with,
disagree with his clock management.
well, right. And you might have disagreed with putting two number threes on the field at the same time. And you might have thought it was stupid to run a reverse on 4th and inches. And that's all fair. But he's just genuinely a good guy. And I think that bought him some cred. And now that the results are showing up on the field, obviously 6 wins are not what Florida fans want. Even if they beat Florida State 7 wins, that's not the norm. But from where they were 2 months ago to where they are now, and with recruiting picking up and everything going on, for the first time in, golly, Graham, 5 years maybe, it's kind of fun to be a Florida Gator fan again, I would bet, if you ask a lot of their fan base.
I tweeted toward the end of the game on Saturday. It was before the game was fully decided, but I tweeted, I am having fun watching Florida Gators football.
Yeah, I saw that. Yeah. Two things. All right. I want to get the Lagway. We've got to talk about Florida State. We've got to talk about recruiting. We talk about the comeback that Billy Napier has made. Caleb Banks and Tyreek Sapp. Brother, I don't know what's gone on in the last couple of weeks. They were decent players. Caleb Banks looks like a top 10 draft pick right now. LSU could not block him. Ole Miss could not block him. I mean, you talk about that defense. Lagway gets all the press clippings, and I get it. He's the quarterback with good reason. The front four of that defense, and even the secondary with all their injury problems, I mean, that was Jackson Dart, man. That was an Ole Miss team that did whatever they wanted really to Georgia 2 weeks prior.
That was an Ole Miss
Holy,
team that got Trey Harris back.
right. Holy crap, what a defensive effort the last couple of games.
Well, look, you and I talked about it before the Ole Miss game. Everybody that talks about Gator football talked about it before the Ole Miss game. This D-line they're about to face is different, right, against Ole Miss. Like, it's the best D-line they faced all year, probably the best D-line basically anybody would face all year. The best defensive lineman on that football field on Saturday was Caleb Banks.
Yeah, it was.
And that's not a debate. He was better than Princely Umanmielen. He was better than Walter Nolan. I mean, Caleb Banks was he was unblockable against LSU. He was virtually unblockable against Ole Miss, especially in that second half. Like, something that was genuinely surprising to me in this game was first half is a little back and forth. Florida gets in the end zone some, Ole Miss gets in the end zone some, and you go into halftime being like, all right, like kind of anybody's game in the second half, right? Like sort of a coin flip, and that's something you talked about to your credit last week. You got to survive early in the game. If you get down really early, then it's gross and this is terrible, and they look. But if they're in the ball game into the second half, into the fourth quarter, Swamp gets into it, Ole Miss Stout gets into it. You were right on the money when you said that. At the start of the third quarter, Florida had that debacle of a drive, right? That very first drive was horrendous, right? Just everything that could have gone wrong did.
Penalties, yeah, it was bad.
Lagway gets crushed first play. They get a holding call the second play, and the drive was over before it started, right?
Yeah.
And then I believe on the next drive, if I'm not mistaken, it was either the drive Ole Miss went down and got points and got a field goal. No, sorry. They muffed the punt. And then Florida still couldn't really do anything on offense, but Trey Smack hit a nice field goal. And then after that, Ole Miss was moving the ball a little bit. They weren't scoring touchdowns, but they were moving the ball. In my head, I was thinking, oh, man, like the lines of scrimmage are starting to win in Ole Miss's favor on both sides pretty heavily. And normally when that's starting to happen early in a second half, that gets worse, not better. So I was worried that by the time the fourth quarter rolled around, Ole Miss was really going to be leaning on that offensive line. Jackson Dart was going to have all kinds of time to throw. They were maybe going to run the ball a little bit, start to get 5 or 6 yards of carry. And then on the opposite side, I thought Florida was going to be Lagway's going to get sacked a couple times, maybe a strip sack. Jaden Ball's going to get stuff behind the line. I thought that was potentially what was coming. And the opposite happened. Time and time and time and time again, this team, especially in the lines of scrimmage, they just get back up and keep playing.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't matter what the circumstances are. Doesn't matter if last series was a bad series or if they gave up a bad penalty. Doesn't matter. This team's ability to put the pass behind them and keep playing ball is a testament to what this coaching staff has been able to do, and it's the reason they were able to win the game on Saturday.
It was a great performance, no question about that. Let's dive into the future now. Let's dive into Florida State. Let's tell you about Southeast Orthopedic Specialist. For the highest quality care, you can rely on Southeast Orthopedic Specialist for any orthopedic injury or concern. You can log on to their website, se-ortho.com, and you can listen for the good doctor Kevin Murphy weekly here on 1010XL on the drill with Dan and Jeff for his weekly analysis of injuries in the world of sports. Doak Campbell Stadium, Saturday night, the 2-9 Florida State Seminoles, the 6-5 Florida Gators. Now, I'm not breaking any news here, Graham. I'm going to pick Florida to win the game. But you know how I've been with this game. I've been very cautiously optimistic. Florida State season ends win, lose, or draw when that clock hits 0 in the fourth quarter on Saturday night. Their season is over. So there is no reason for them to hold anything in the playbook. It would not surprise me to see a surprise onside kick, a fake punt, any double reverse wide receiver passes to the offensive eligible tackle you got, anything you got. If you're Florida State, there's no point holding everything in because you're not going to play another game that matters for over 8 months. Florida State is the worst team of my lifetime. I'm older than you, so they're obviously, in my opinion, the worst team of your lifetime as well. That's worn the garnet and gold. They are awful. Having said all that, I think like the North Carolina game, the Boston College game, the SMU game, I genuinely don't know how interested some of those Florida State players were in being there, particularly North Carolina, Notre Dame, etc. They're going to be interested in this one against Florida on a Saturday night at home. I think you're going to get Florida State's best shot. Now, I don't know how good that is. That might be relative because they're a bad team. But I think Florida State's going to probably play their best game of the year. Will it matter? I tend to doubt it. But anybody that thinks this game's going to be, quote, easy for Florida, and maybe I've just been beaten over the head so much in Tallahassee. I lived through 90 and 92 and the choke at Doak and 96 and 90. I mean, Spurrier never won there, right? And I know that's a long time ago. As great as Steve Spurrier was, he never won in Tallahassee. We've seen really good Florida teams go in there and get beat that had no business getting beat. So I think Florida wins the game, but that past history in that stadium, particularly at night, I think should have Gator fans concerned a little bit. Your thoughts?
My thoughts are something that you have gone to multiple times this year that I agreed with for Florida is true on Saturday for Florida State. You said it before the Tennessee game. You said it before this past game against Ole Miss, and probably a couple games in between. I think you said it with the Georgia game as well, when you were talking about how important it is to survive the first quarter. And you can't allow an onslaught to happen. You can't allow you get down 14-0 really fast, and you blink and you're down double digits or something like that, right? And then if you do weather that storm, then ideally as the game goes on, you might get a little momentum, doubt on the other sideline creeps in a little bit, that type of thing. That is true for Florida State on Saturday. For them, it's incredibly important to, I know Doak is at a reduced capacity right now, but the fans that are there on Saturday, it's incredibly important that they keep those fans engaged. They'll have juice to start the game. To your point, I mean it's Florida State. Of course, the fans are going to be excited. Of course, the sideline's going to be rocking there, and they're going to be feeling good, right?
It's their Super Bowl. It's
Of course,
the end of their season. I mean, this is it for them.
of course. And if you're Florida, you are doing everything you can in that first quarter to give them knockout blows and take away that juice that they're going to start the game with, right? You're looking for that early deep shot from DJ Lagway. You're looking for that big run Jaden Baugh could bust off and lower the shoulder at the end of it and knock somebody on their ass, right? You're looking for Caleb Banks and Tyreek Sapp to get in there and give Luke Kromenhoek hell.
By the way, the Florida State offensive line is putrid.
It's really, 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 really bad. Yeah.
Banks, Sapp, Cam Jackson, TJ Searcy, McCray, all these guys should feast on Kromenhoek because that Florida State offensive line is awful.
Well, and again, to stick with the point we're talking about, you want to really make that bad offensive line struggle, go ahead and get them in third and obvious passing downs. Mm-hmm. Right? Go ahead and stuff them first and second down if they're trying to run the ball. Go ahead and get them, first down, loss of 1, second down, gain of 2. And now it's third and long, and they got to drop back and try to pass. If they get Florida State in multiple situations like that, you're going to see Caleb Banks and Tyreek Sapp celebrating a lot at the end of plays, right? And again, it's important on the Gator sideline, it's important to do that early. You need to do that early because FSU, I believe, you said it a minute ago. With some of these other games that weren't their arch rival, they clearly had quit. And they had quit a long time ago, right? But you're absolutely right. I totally agree with you that this game is going to have a much higher elevated level of effort from the Florida State side than they've gotten in a while.
Very similar to Miami. Remember, people thought Miami was going to beat them by 50, and that was at least a game in the fourth quarter.
It was a competitive, right. So again, it's important for Florida. If Florida wants to roll them the way they expect to, and the way a lot of Gator fans expect to, myself included, that first quarter, you need some knockout blows. Like I said, you need Lagway getting down the field to Badger early. You need Jaden Baugh getting lathered up and running the ball and getting downhill and running people over. And on the opposite side, again, you got to drive them backwards. Negative plays, sacks. And then, especially if they get down a little bit, that's going to turn into turnovers. And then things can get really ugly, and the fans are going to leave, and you're going to make them fold pretty quickly. I don't think it's going to take a whole lot to get them to fold, but you got to do it early.
Real quick, 2 things. Number 1, my dog is over here snoring her behind off. Can you hear that?
I cannot.
Okay, good. She's really resting over here.
We started talking Florida State, and she started snoring.
Yeah, apparently that knocked her out. So I need to know if I need to wake her up to get her to stop snoring like a beast. All right, so that's good. Number 2, when it comes to this game, again, take the crowd out of the game. I think that crowd will be fired up. Another interesting aspect of this, though, is unlike anything I've ever seen in recruiting. And I followed recruiting. I mean, that was literally one of my main jobs for like 3 or 4 years back in the day, was talking to all these kids and recruiting. And I still follow it pretty good. Have a lot of these guys on that commit to Florida and Florida State. I've never seen one school literally flip 3 guys from another school inside of 2 weeks before signing day, which is what Florida has done. Florida has flipped a quarterback, a running back, and an offensive lineman all within the last week and a half that were committed to Florida State.
With potentially the best player in their class from Jacksonville. Yeah, I don't want to speak. I don't have any insider knowledge on that, but Solomon Thomas it's saying a lot to assume he's going to be a null at this point.
It is. I still think LSU is very much in play there. It's either LSU, Florida, or Florida State. But you're right. Florida could flip another one. So Florida State and that fan base, they're feeling pretty down right now, I would imagine. Not only are you 2-9, not only do you see what Florida's doing, but you've lost 3 guys to the Gators in the recruiting trail in the last week. I mean, come out and jump on them early. I'll tell you this, too, which will be an interesting dynamic. Florida was clearly the underdog against LSU. Florida was clearly the underdog against Ole Miss. And now they're hearing how great they are. Now they're hearing, oh, man, you guys made it. You guys turned the corner. They're clearly the favorite by 2 touchdowns going into this game. We've seen how they handle adversity, as you mentioned earlier. Now, how do they handle success on Saturday night?
Yeah, I totally agree. And being on the road, You know,
Roads
I think
relative because I mean I agree it's a tough environment. It's a shortened capacity and there's going to be a lot of orange and blue in that stadium. I think
I
Gator
agree,
fans
but
have gotten their hands on a lot of tickets.
it's less so. I think it's less so that they're facing a super hostile environment. I think it's more so that they're not at the Swamp
Yeah.
because this big turnaround, all these big wins have all been at the Swamp. Um, correct me if I'm wrong, Hack. The only away true road game, the only two true road games where they've played genuinely well were Tennessee and Mississippi State. Am I missing one?
No, the only other road game they had was Texas, right?
Yeah, I guess you're right.
Is that road? They only
um,
had 4 road games. Yeah, 7 home games, 4 road games in Jacksonville, I guess.
yeah, yeah, I guess you're right. But obviously, Texas was an entirely different beast. I'm not comparing them whatsoever. But the last time you were on the road, they laid an egg. So again, that's totally relative, and I'm not even saying that's going to be a gigantic factor or anything.
Well, and I
I'm
think
just saying it's going to be.
Really quick, I thought Lagway handled himself really well in Knoxville after Mertz got hurt. And I thought he handled himself really well at the cocktail party, which obviously isn't a true road game, but there's 40,000 Georgia fans in there going
But
nuts.
it's
And
away
I,
from the Swamp to the point we're saying.
right.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. And again, to me, it just all comes down. I think Florida wins the game regardless. I don't really see a world where FSU wins the game, but the difference between this being an absolute onslaught where Florida just murders them versus a game that Florida fans are just kind of frustrated the whole time because they can't totally pull away like they should. To your point that you've been making all year, and I'm going to keep hammering home on this episode, it's that first quarter, man. Florida goes down and scores a touchdown, punches it in, gets a stop, goes and scores again. You make it 10-0 at the end of that first quarter, or at least like 7-0 or something like that. Then I think you could make this really ugly for them really fast
Today's
instead of
Ga-
giving them a little belief in the team they hate the most and want to beat the most.
Today's Gator Bytes podcast is brought to you by Southeast Orthopedic Specialists. Again, for the highest quality care, you can rely on Southeast Orthopedic Specialists for any orthopedic injury or concern. They have locations all over Jacksonville and St. Augustine, and you can visit their website, se-ortho.com. And we certainly appreciate Southeast Orthopedic Specialists, their continued support of the Gator Bytes podcast. All right, back to Florida, Florida State in a moment. Really interesting rivalry weekend in light of the rankings that came out last night. There's a lot of angry people today, particularly Alabama, Ole Miss, Clemson. Let's start right there. Clemson, South Carolina, Alabama, Auburn, Ole Miss, Mississippi State. Do any of those games play a factor in the ultimate college football playoff bracket?
Say them again. Clemson, South
Clemson,
Carolina.
South Carolina, Alabama, Auburn, Ole Miss, Mississippi State. Do any of them play a factor in what we're going to see in the bracket a week from Sunday?
You're asking me, can the underdog win any of the games, basically?
Or if Alabama and Ole Miss still mathematically alive, do you think they still have a chance to get in?
I tend to not think so. I mean, 3 losses. I get it's
Here's
the
my
SEC.
question. My question when it comes to Alabama is this, and I think I know what the committee's going to do, but I don't necessarily agree with it. Georgia beats Georgia Tech and then loses the SEC championship game to Texas. Let's say that's what happens. All right, Texas beats A&M on Saturday, goes and plays Georgia, and Texas beats Georgia, which is certainly plausible. It's hard to beat a team twice. That puts a third loss on Georgia. Alabama's going to be screaming about that because Alabama's got 3 losses, Georgia has 3 losses, and Alabama beat them head to head. Like we've talked about, does playing in the SEC championship game, could that hurt a team like Georgia if that's the ultimate scenario?
It could. I hope it does not. In my
So,
opinion, I understand Alabama won head to head. Georgia never got embarrassed by a terrible Oklahoma team. And
yeah.
Georgia, for the regular season, will only have 2 losses. And the problem with this and where we have to make sure we separate the conversation, because I see where you're going with this and it's important. After championship weekend, assuming Georgia lost, to your point, sticking with that hypothetical, it's going to become, well, you have a 3-loss Bama team, you have a 3-loss Georgia team. No, no, no. Bama's a 3-loss team because they lost 3 in the regular season. Georgia is a 2-loss team that made the SEC championship game. That's how you have to look at it. A lot of people have been talking about this. You cannot get punished for making the championship game and losing.
Well, within reason. I mean, A&M, if they lose a championship game, they're not getting in the playoff.
Correct,
So,
because they already have 3 losses.
right. That's
What I mean by getting punished, is, it can't be where you would have had a better chance of making the playoff had you not gone to the championship game at all. Does that make sense what I'm saying?
Yeah, no, I hear what you're saying. And I'm just thinking out loud here. Okay, so Georgia and Tennessee. I think based on the rankings last night, Georgia's 8, Tennessee's 9. I agree. I think if both win this weekend, they're in the playoff.
I think so
Alabama's
too.
going to be screaming about it, but I think that's reality. Now, who has a tougher time? Georgia with Georgia Tech or Tennessee with Vanderbilt?
I've been thinking about this as well. Rob says that's what happened last year with UGA. Rob says that's what happened last year with UGA. He's exactly right, and that was wrong in my opinion. Everybody talked about Florida State getting screwed. Georgia got screwed last year.
Yeah, but Florida State got the business last year. I agree. Georgia had an argument, but Florida State had the biggest argument.
But did Georgia not get punished for being in the SEC championship game? They did.
Yeah.
Anyways, moving on. I've been thinking about both those games all week, Hack. I'm glad you brought this up because I've wanted to talk about these two games so badly. I believe Georgia is going to roll Georgia Tech.
Roll Georgia Tech. Okay.
Night game between the hedges. Kirby Smart knows that some style points could help them out.
The Georgia Tech team this team beat Miami not that long ago.
Georgia would roll Miami, in my opinion, right now. That game is Friday night, if I'm correct, right? Between the hedges? Yeah, Friday night between the. That atmosphere is going to be rocking. It's going to be electric for Georgia. They need this game. They might not need it, but it will certainly help them if they can just spank Georgia Tech and really give them another super convincing win in their resume. And Kirby Smart knows that.
Oh no, they need to beat Georgia Tech. If they don't beat Georgia Tech, then they have to win the SEC championship game.
I know that, but I'm saying beating the hell out of Georgia Tech.
Oh right, okay.
Could help them versus just winning by 7 or 10 or whatever. You don't want to look slow and clunky. You want Carson Beck to go out there and be throwing it around, and you want them to win convincingly. Tennessee Vanderbilt is very interesting, in my opinion. And that's a game that I don't think heading into rivalry weekend people are talking about enough. Tennessee is a good football team, but they have struggled at times this year, and they have looked clunky at certain times this year. And Nico Iamaleava has at times missed open deep shots, and they've struggled to get going at times. Sometimes they look great, sometimes they don't. Noon kickoff at Vanderbilt. I know the whole stadium is going to be orange. I get that. You're in Tennessee, and I understand that part. But noon kickoff, 11 a.m. Central Time, against a Vandy team that's been feisty all year, as we know, against a good quarterback in Diego Pavia. That's a game to keep your eye on in the noon slate, Hack.
If Tennessee loses, that puts 3 losses on them. They beat Alabama head-to-head. Who would get in?
You start talking chaos. You start talking true college football chaos, head is spinning. That would be the perfect scenario, right?
It's Alabama's the much bigger brand. I mean, Alabama's the bigger brand.
At that point, Hack, I believe Alabama would sneak their way in backdoor.
And Tennessee would be fuming because they beat them head-to-head.
Yes, they would.
That would be wild. All right, so I don't know how much. I'll tell you another one, too. Miami goes to the Carrier Dome, man. That's a tough game going to Syracuse. Now, Miami still is kind of getting the business. I think Miami has to win out. I think they have to beat Syracuse. I think they have to beat SMU. I think if they lose one of these two, even though they would have a bye right now based on the rankings last night, I think if they lose one of these two, Graham, not only do they not get a bye, I don't think they're in the playoffs.
It's really boom or bust for Miami, isn't it? I agree. They're gonna have a real uphill battle trying to be in the at-large conversation versus a lot of these SEC teams that have played a significantly harder schedule, and it isn't even close. Um, Honestly, for Miami's sake, one of the best things that's happening to them right now is Florida looking a lot better.
Yeah,
Because how much
it
better does
helps.
that win look killing them in the swamp now than it did then? That back then it was like, well, Florida's dead anyways.
Let
Now
me
it's like,
ask you this: Does Notre Dame have to beat Southern Cal?
yes, yeah.
Because
I
it
know
would be Notre
they
Dame's
lost to
second
Southern
loss.
Illinois. Was it no Northern Illinois? Northern Illinois, right? It's who
Yeah.
Notre Dame lost to. I mean, come on, man. You can't lose to Northern Illinois at home and be afforded a second loss. And USC is not that good. So they have to win that game, I believe. But to it's interesting now because it's like it's almost the reverse of what the conversation has always been. With only 4 teams, it was always, man, there's only 4 spots. Like someone's got to get the boot. Like who needs to be made space for at that table? But now, especially this year, because you've had so many teams get that third loss you didn't expect them to get. And now we're almost doing the opposite. We're trying to find teams almost to fit kind of the back half of this 12 because I have no problem right now saying Alabama does not deserve even a shot to be in the playoff. They don't deserve it at all. It's not always about most deserving. I understand that. But they lost to Vanderbilt and got murdered by Oklahoma last week. Wasn't like it was week 1, it was last week. And Oklahoma's awful. Like, and they lost to a good Tennessee team on the road. Like, 3 losses, you should never even be allowed to complain about it with 3 losses, in my opinion.
No, I agree. I agree. And again, this is year one of this system, so it'll be really interesting to see what the committee weighs, what they look at, things like that. Bottom line is it's going to be an awesome week. A lot of huge games, no question about it. All right, let's circle back to where we started. Florida State, Doak Campbell Stadium, Saturday night, ESPN2, 7 o'clock. I think we're both taking Florida. The game I'm kind of looking at is Florida pulls away in the fourth quarter. I think maybe it's 20-13 Gators. 8 minutes to go. Jaden Baugh rips off a 30-yard touchdown run to make it 27-13. Maybe they add a field goal late to make it look a little worse than it maybe was. Give me the Gators 30-13. But again, I think at the beginning of the fourth quarter, this game will be in doubt.
31-10 Gators.
Dominate all the way through or close game for a while?
Close game in the first quarter. Gators pull away early second quarter, and then it's over after that.
And that would be unreal to end with 3 straight wins. And you talk about momentum on the recruiting trail. It would just build and build and build. Quickly, before we say goodbye, I got like 2 minutes. Florida basketball finally gets tested again tomorrow. Wake Forest. And then I believe it's another pretty decent opponent on Friday, depending on what happens in that tournament. Wichita State plays somebody, and Florida's going to get presumably the winner of that game or loser. But nice back-to-back games on Thursday and Friday for the Gators to kind of see where this basketball team is.
Gator basketball, man. It's been a really exciting year so far. They look really good. They're still undefeated. And the Wake Forest game will tell us a lot because that's probably the best team they've played so far. I don't know a whole lot about Wake Forest, but I don't know if they're better than Florida State or not. I think they are. Anyways, college basketball, I got to lock in a little bit more, especially after football season ends. I've been locking to the Gators, but not like nationally as much. But yeah, that should be a great game. And the Gators, man, they get so many rebounds and they're tall and they're physical inside and they can get to the rack that even on nights they don't shoot well, they're still competitive. And then on nights that they do shoot well, they can beat anybody in the country.
Yeah, no question about it. Well, I appreciate you, Graham. Happy Thanksgiving to you and your family.
Yes,
Enjoy
sir. Likewise.
Florida State on Saturday, and we'll be back next week to recap it all. Rivalry weekend. He is Graham Marsh. I'm the hacker Ryan Green. This has been Gator Bytes on the 1010XL.com podcast network and on the Florida Gator 1010XL Facebook page.